Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call the Tuesday, June 20th, 2023 Housing, Urban Development, and Zoning Committee meeting to order. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Present. Alderwoman Sonnier. Alderman Browning.
Present.
Chair Clerk Hubbard.
Here.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Sonnier. We have 3 present. You have a quorum.
All right, thank you. First thing we need to do is the approval of the minutes. I'll accept the motion for the approval of the minutes from Tuesday, June 13th, 2023.
So moved. Seconded.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderwoman Sonnier. Alderman Browning.
Aye.
Chair Clerk Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Sonnier. We have 3 aye votes.
All right, moving on. Is there anyone here for Board Bill 26 yet? Okay, thank you. I did see Alderwoman Tyus pull up, so I was trying to see if I could have gotten you all out the way. So what we'll do is move along because I don't want to hold people up. I think Alderwoman Tyus, perfect timing. All right. I'd like to call Alderwoman Tyus and her guests up to the dais for Board Bill, recognized on Board Bill 26. That's him in the white shirt behind you.
Okay. I'm sorry. I thought I was going to be late. I was at the doctor's.
That's good. When I saw you pull up, I was like, that's good, so she can get on in here.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, thank you for having me before your committee. I have Board Bill number 26, which is an ordinance recommended, had an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change zoning of property on Natural Bridge at Clarence. Basically, it's changing the zoning on Clarence from B2 family to F neighborhood commercial district. It's very important. The team that's going to be before you, they're going to build a new grocery store, a Fields grocery store, and a senior building that is very much needed on the Natural Bridge corridor. I've been fighting for this corridor for 30 years, so I'm pleased. It started out in my ward when it was the first ward. We had some concerns about closing the Walgreens. I had heard both Walgreens were going to close, so didn't want that to happen. People thought I was being too cautious, but now we see I was not being too cautious because the Page Walgreens is now closed. So we moved it down they moved it down to Clarence. They were working with a former alderperson, which I want to give him credit for working with them. But it ended up back in my ward anyway, and I am very much supportive of it. I was supportive of the project. I just didn't want to close down my Walgreens. We worked really, really hard to get those 2 Walgreens. I'm saddened about it closing that Page because I was able to piggyback off of Alderman Clay to get mine. Every place he went, I would say, I want a Walgreens too. So we were able to keep the Walgreens and to add some much needed development and a senior building and a mixed-use building down at Clarence and Natural Bridge. And there's some other things. I'm right across the street from Alderwoman Keys, who's working on some things, and I am fully in support of this project. And again, this only is the zoning portion of it. They will also have to vacate part of an alley and in a street, but it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful project, and I'd ask for your support.
Absolutely. All right, with that, did you want your speaker to come up just in case you had any questions? Okay.
Introduce yourself.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Jim Whistler with Grimes Consulting. I'm working
I'm sorry,
with
Mr. Winsor, I'm going to have to swear you in, okay?
Okay,
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Proceed.
All right. Again, my name is Jim Whistler with Grimes Consulting. I'm here on behalf of the developer. Alderwoman Tyus did a great job introducing it. I'm here for any questions.
Thank you so much. And I do see the developer just walked in. If she would like to come up to see if anybody had any questions, you can get sworn in, and then we can move through the committee.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson and members of the committee. I'm Yafet El-Amin, the President of Advocacy Consulting and Development, the lead developer on the Fields project.
Ms. Elmine, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. I'll move through in order of seniority. Alderwoman Schweitzer, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Great. Alderman Browning, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Vice Chair Sonnier, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Okay, I don't have any questions other than that, I can't wait for you to get started. When will you get started? I followed this project in the Planning Commission, and I'm so excited to be here and to be in support of it as well, along with Alderwoman Tyus. And with her permission, I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you, Alderwoman Tyus, for your support of the development, as well as the Planning and Zoning Committee. We are anxious to turn over ground. However, as you all know, this is a part of the process that we are eagerly anticipating the passage of this bill so that we can continue to move forward to bring the first Phil's grocery store to North St. Louis. So we appreciate all of the support of this body and the city of St. Louis. Thank you.
Absolutely. Great job. Okay, with that, Madam Alderwoman, would you like to close?
Madam Chairwoman and members of the board, I again ask for your support of Board Bill 26. As I say, this is only one part of it. It is the zoning. We have to do vacations. I'm also supporting tax abatement. I'm also going to be supporting those ARPA funds that we need on Natural Bridge. It's all very well needed. 30 years ago, I got to meet with the president and CEO of National's grocery store when I was pushing for Snooks. I did not understand that Nationals was this big conglomerate that was not just in St. Louis, and he told me, we don't want Snooks to be in North St. Louis. And I said, oh, because I'm so young and don't know anything. Oh, but see, we need diversity and we need different kinds of grocery stores. And he said, I don't. He flew down in his private jet. We met at the Balabans. He said, I don't want Snooks to be in North St. Louis. Snooks had told me the same thing, and I thought that they were just being racist. I was like, why aren't you guys here? And you're in South St. Louis, and there's 5 of you there. Well, when we agreed to do Snooks at Union and Natural Bridge, 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, he sold all the Nationals to Snooks, and that's what power looks like. I am opposed to monopolies. I think it's unfair in communities where you only have one grocery store. So I'm glad to see, except for those little corner stores that cause a lot of problems, I'm glad to see something come into the community that would have fresh fruit and a vision about having a senior building right there so they can have access to a grocery store, and also at the same time will vastly improve the landscape of Natural Bridge with development, all positive things, and I ask for your passage of Board Bill 26.
Absolutely. Thank you. I just take a motion for the due pass recommendation of Board Bill 26.
I'll move that we pass this out of committee with a due pass recommendation for Board Bill 26.
Second.
Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sonnier.
Aye.
Alderman Browning.
Aye.
Chair Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. We have 4 aye votes.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you very
Alderwoman
much.
Tyus, and congratulations to the developers as well.
This is going to be a fabulous developer,
Absolutely.
and she's going to do a lot more in the 12th Ward. And I know she's your constituent, but you better get a hold of her because she won't be available. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. With that, I will turn this over to Vice Chair Sonnier.
All right. Hello, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. You are recognized to speak to item number 2 on our agenda, Board Bill number 59. If you want to, speak to it, and then we can do the swearing-ins of everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vice Chair Sonnier. Madam Clerk, can you read the summary of Board Bill 59, please?
Board Bill number 59, introduced by Alderwoman Shameem Clark Hubbard, an ordinance related to the establishment of a right to counsel program for tenants facing eviction or equivalent proceedings. The implementation, oversight, and annual reporting of this program. The provisions of legal representation for tenants under this program, and the disclosure of tenants of certain information pertaining to this program, including a severability clause and an emergency clause.
Great, thank you. So, great. So, this is actually our second go-round with this but I'm so excited and ready for us to bring this home for the community. Well, I'm gonna start by saying something that I didn't have planned to say today, but maybe this person is watching, for whoever sent me the threatening letter today that was typewritten in a pink envelope threatening me about Board Bill 37. You didn't do anything but motivate me, because the only reason I got into politics was to advocate for my constituency, advocate for so many communities that have still to this day feel voiceless, and to bring resources home to the communities. So with that being said, this is right in line with what I'm here for. So I'm so ready to hear from all of the constituents that are here today, to pick up this baton, which I always give credit where credit is due, to former Alderwoman Christina Gracia and all the work that she did prior to this to get us here, right? This is a marathon, and I'm just thankful that she thought enough of me to put me in place to carry this on for her and bring it home. So just a reminder of a few things, and then Vice Chair Sonnier, I would ask that we just swear in everybody that is signed up to speak at one time. But this has been a collective effort. Of course, I mentioned the champion that was in Christina and Gracia, but I want to also mention some of the others that have already been a part of this work. Arch City Grants, Home for All, Action St. Louis, the Mayor's Administration, the President's Office, the Housing Authority, McCormick Barron, landlords, right? And most importantly, the people. And we want to make sure that at a time like this, we take care, and when we have the resources in place, we take care of some of our most vulnerable residents, right? And that's the spirit, I believe, that Board Bill 59 came out of, and that we're going to carry it through on. So with that, since we all are, again, familiar with this, I would like to yield and begin with the testimonies.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can we get everyone that's signed in sworn in?
Can I have everyone who signed in, please hold your right hand up? Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You may proceed.
Okay, we can start with the first person on the list.
And Vice Chair Sonnier, do you have a timer, or do you have minutes? How many minutes you want to give them?
I have a timer. Everyone will get 3 minutes.
Great.
I have Ms. White.
Good afternoon, Ms. White.
My concerns are with HUD and public housing and housing authority. There are so many laws that should be passed to help the elder, the seniors, and even low-income families. We have where there is landlords that are evicting tenants for so many different reasons, as well as judges going along with the landlords and not the tenants. It's getting to be where you can't find a decent place to live because they're raising the rent so high. You're living in roach-infested housing, mice-infested housing, and the landlords are not even concerned about that. When you're late paying your rent, it's a concern. But for your living and your children to have a comfortable, safe environment, the landlords are not even caring. And to HUD and housing, to not even follow through with it is sad. And that's why I'm here. I've seen so many seniors that are not even safe living in a senior citizen building because they're roach infested, or they have mice, or even bed bugs. When you raise the flag about the infestation, then you get threatened to be evicted. That's not right. It shouldn't even go like that. And I thank you all for listening. I could go on forever because I love seniors. I'm a senior myself. I just see that the laws should change to help and better housing. The rent is outrageous. If you're on a fixed income and you're disabled, you can't pay $1,200 a month for a one-bedroom. If I pay $600, I'm living in an infested area where I'm still not safe because I have to worry about the bed bugs or the roaches or even the mice or rats. The law should not allow that. The state shouldn't even allow it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. White. Members of the committee, if you all have any questions or any responses as people speak, you can feel free to, I don't have to recognize you formally, you can speak. And also for speakers, if you can talk as close into the mic as possible so that the folks at home and people listening can hear your words. I think your testimony is powerful. I want to make sure everyone is able to hear and understand what's being said. We can proceed with the next speaker.
Tracy Fantini.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. It's good to see you today. I'm here today representing HOPE, which stands for Housing Options Provided for the Elderly. I am the Assistant Director, and I have served HOPE or worked for them in some capacity for over 15 years. Our organization has been serving low income, and when I say low income, I mean the lowest, poorest, older adults in the city for over 35 years. Our mission is to help older adults live with dignity and independence in the housing most appropriate to their circumstances. And we are here to support Board Bill 59 because what we have seen since the beginning of our organization back in the 80s is that without being informed of rights and having counsel to represent them, our clients have very little chance of fighting illegal and unjust evictions. So what we have seen are landlords lying to tenants about being evicted or why they need to leave the property. So I'm not talking about people who haven't paid their rent or committing some kind of lease violation. They're just being told to get out. They're harassing their tenants who they want to leave and threatening them in various ways. They are locking them out sometimes illegally. Most recently, the most disturbing trend that we're seeing is something that was previously mentioned, which is landlords evicting tenants so that they can raise the rent because they can get a higher price. They are putting people out for various reasons in order to collect that. And many of these are women, low income women and women of color. So what we see also is that most of our clients, this is happening because they don't know their rights, first of all. They don't know where to go for help. They don't know how to access free legal counsel, which most of them are so poor they qualify for. They are not able to access counsel in time to prevent the eviction if they even learn about it or are able to apply and get services, which we don't have enough of to begin with anyway. Arch City and Legal Services of Eastern Missouri provide those services, but they don't have nearly enough resources to meet that need. And so what ends up happening to our clients is that many end up homeless or on the streets.
I'm sorry, that's time.
May I finish one sentence?
Okay.
Thank you. They end up homeless on the streets with evictions on their records, and what that does is it prevents them from accessing affordable housing later, including HUD senior housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrea Hall.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, Ms. Hall.
My name is Andrea Hall, and I am a tenant in the 5th Ward. And I am just here because I feel that having legal representation for people facing evictions should have always been the case. Going from somebody that was paying market rate rent my entire life to now living in housing, I just see there is a lot of real unjust in the system. There's a lot of threatening through legal paperwork about if you not coming in to re-sign leases when they want you to. It's just a lot of things that are really going on that we really do need legal representation, and it should have always been in place. So that's pretty much all that.
Thank you.
Ms. Shanika Whitfield.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Ms. Whitfield.
I'm speaking to the Bill 59. My name is Shonda Whitfield. I am a steward of SEIU. We represent the 3,500 members of the essential workers labor union based in St. Louis. Our members are dietitians, housekeepers, CNAs, laundry, floor techs, housekeepers, and women of color. We are essential workers who's keeping hospitals, nursing homes, and home care agencies going. As a woman of color, our members are greatly impacted by Missouri unfair eviction process. So many of us have lost homes and been put out in the streets. Black renters are evicted much more often than white people are. We support the tenants we supported the council that represented in KC, and with the allies in KC, tenants pushed forth for this bill in KC with our allies, and we wholly supported the legislation by Alderman Clark Hubbard, Schweitzer, Sonnier, Aldridge, and President Green. What happens when a family is evicted? You know, everybody should just really pay attention to just that question alone. What happened to the families? You know, kids be misplaced. Sometimes you have to send your kids to live with someone else, you know, because you don't have some place to go. You know, school get behind for your kids, things start to happen, mental health start to set in, just things just go wrong, and you know, you have suicide rates going on when you just don't know where I'm going next. You know, so this additional, you know, you got to find money to try to get security deposits and things of that nature to try to fix what someone else has broken. You know, sometimes it doesn't have to, like the ladies before, sometimes it's just about $1. You know, you could be paying your rent, you may be a little late, but sometimes they just, you know, okay, I'm gonna move them out the way, I can get a little bit more market rate. So, you know, we just learned valuable lessons during this pandemic. Families are unstable with children, you know, with this bill, we can have more access to food for our children, schools, recreations, parents are better able to get to work and take care of their families when eviction isn't looming them in the horizontal. This bill is a creative way to ensure family stability. So I just thank you all for listening and hope you all support this bill.
Thank you.
Abby Leonard.
Hello, my name is Abby Leonard, and I am a social worker at Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. I work in LSEM's housing unit, where we assist and represent low-income families and individuals facing eviction, loss of housing assistance, poor living conditions, discrimination, and other housing crises. Our work demonstrates a clear and urgent need for representation and education of tenants with unstable housing situations that are often compounded with the effects of systemic poverty. Since the beginning of the pandemic, Legal Services has closed over 2,600 cases for tenant households at risk of eviction. Nearly 1,200 of those were for residents of the city of St. Louis. Our clients are disproportionately people of color and disproportionately female-headed households. These findings are consistent with Princeton University's eviction lab data that evictions disproportionately impact women of color and their children. Evictions are a race issue and a gender equity issue. 595 of the households we helped received legal counsel and advice that allowed them to make informed decisions about how to manage their housing crises. More than 600 households received full representation. Over 80% of households that received full representation had significant benefits as a result of this, including avoiding over $1 million in rental and utility debt, late fees, court costs, and attorney's fees, having eviction lawsuits dismissed, avoiding sheriff's evictions as a result of settlement agreements, avoiding money judgments, negotiating payment plans, overcoming illegal or excessive charges and late fees by landlords, having security levels raised on court records to keep eviction filings from public view, retaining existing housing and avoiding homelessness, and many others. While our legal representation has a monumental impact on the clients we served, LSEM is only able to represent a fraction of the tenants who seek our services. Right to counsel would bring this needed assistance to thousands of others in our city who need legal representation and level the playing field against landlords engaging in unlawful evictions and other unscrupulous practices. Based on our experience at Legal Services, as well as my personal experience as a social worker in our housing unit, having a lawyer makes all the difference in the world for families facing evictions or otherwise at the mercy of landlords who usually have representation. This bill, if enacted, would help level the playing field. The passage of Board Bill 59 would offer renters and their families, disproportionately women of color and their children, a better chance of staying in their homes and allow for stable livelihoods. It will advance racial equity, keep families in their homes, and have numerous other benefits previously mentioned to further a more equitable St. Louis. I implore the Board of Alders to pass Tenants' Right to Counsel in the City of St. Louis. Thank you.
Molly Mesger.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Molly Metzger. I'm a senior lecturer and chair for social and economic development at the Brown School at Washington University and a resident of the 7th Ward. I'm also a board member at DeSales Community Development, which develops and manages affordable housing in Tower Grove East, Fox Park, and throughout the city. So in that capacity, I have one foot on the landlord side of the equation regarding affordable housing. And I'm here to say thank you to all of the sponsors of this bill and to everyone who's been fighting for this bill for a long time now. As others have testified powerfully today, eviction is devastating to renters, to families, and to communities. Research clearly shows that a right to counsel will help people stay housed, which in turn has benefits for physical and emotional health, for household finances and education, and for maintaining relationships in family and in community. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that if we can establish and fully fund a right to counsel in St. Louis, it will be life-saving. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beverly Lottie? Lackey?
Thank you. I am just a renter, but I am also with ADHD and PTSD. And we rented what I thought was a quaint little house on
I'm sorry,
Arsenal.
can you pull the mic a little closer to you?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
During which I had also emotional support animals. During the course of living there, we noticed that the place was literally falling apart. And we did have emotional animals in there as well, and although I had documentations that they were there for emotional support, I was always harassed by them, although I did keep the areas clean when I had them with me. I still have them with me. Anyways, we had like staircase going up to a dorm, and the electricity went out. I was with a friend and messing with my hair, what have you, and I was more than half dressed. The landowners barged into the door without my permission. I was standing there undressed, and she ran around the house while I sat quietly. However, she called me to her, And she started hollering, yelling, demanding why the electricity popped. I don't know. I'm not an electrician. I have no idea. You know what happened. You did something. No, I did not. Yes, you did. And in all this time, I'm standing there being harassed. I'm not sure how to conclude this, but yes, we were evicted because they blamed us for structural damages that was their responsibility, and I was held responsible not only for electricity, but the stair steps separating, although the house is sinking and there were other issues, and we were blamed for it all. Therefore, people like myself also need representation, that we are being held for structural mishaps, falling apart, what have you, that we do not do, but yet held responsible, harassed, and discriminated for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kennedy Gardner.
Madam Vice Chairwoman and members of the committee, thank you for having me today. My name is Kennedy Mears Gardner, and I'm an attorney with the Metropolitan St. Louis Equal Housing and Opportunity Council. On behalf of EHOC and myself, I write to ask you to support Board Bill 59. I'm one of the few attorneys actively representing tenants facing eviction in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. And I'm writing to appeal to you on a personal level today, based on what I see in the courts every day. The odds are blatantly against tenants. Across the country, more than 80% of landlords are represented by counsel in eviction actions, while only 10% of tenants have representation. This disparity is utterly one-sided and despicable, and when evictions are disproportionately impacting people of color, individuals with disabilities, seniors, and LGBTQIA folks, the impact is even more disparate. In St. Louis City, there are only a few attorneys and organizations that represent tenants, along with Arch City, Legal Services, and us, leaving us spread so thin by the sheer amount of folks that there are to help with their eviction actions. Many days I have to make a choice between stepping in to represent a single mother and her 3 kids, or an elderly woman who has a disability and lives on a fixed income. On a personal level, that's a heart-wrenching decision to have to make, but unfortunately, it's one that we're forced to make every day. With the right to counsel, those heartbreaking decisions would be unnecessary. Everyone would have representation. And that representation makes a difference, like folks have already said. It protects people who would just don't know to show up to court, which ends up in default judgments, which evicts most of the people in the city and county. With the lack of rental assistance that's coming, evictions are gonna go even higher, and so having counsel there to represent those folks would help a lot. In a lot of these cases, I'm fighting against evictions that shouldn't have even been filed in the first place. Housing is essential. It's stability, it's safety. You all know that. Housing provides a stepping stone to so many other wonderful outcomes in an individual's life. A safe, habitable, and affordable home benefits not only the individual living in it, but also the community around them. Evictions shatter that stability and leave tenants facing impossible decisions on how to keep their children in school, where they'll lay their head at night, and where their next meal will come from. A right to counsel will be so beneficial to the city of St. Louis for so many reasons, but just to name a few. Having every tenant represented by counsel will keep the bad actor landlords in check. As is, there's so many slumlords who do not take care of their properties in direct violation of city ordinances requiring that. Cases in which attorneys are present settle faster and trials are dealt with faster. The court's time will be spent more judiciously. It will save the city money, and lots of it. It reduces government expenditures on homeless shelters, emergency health care, and foster care, because like I said, housing provides stability. So on behalf of EHOC and myself, I strongly encourage you all to pass Board Bill 59 and fully fund a tenant's right to counsel. Thank you.
Keith Rose.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Rose.
My name is Keith Rose. I live in the 7th Ward, but I am about to move to I live in the 6th, but I'm about to move to the 7th next week. I am also the director of LGBTQ initiatives at EHOC, the Equal Housing Opportunity Council, and I formerly helped manage our eviction defense program. After years of volunteering in emergency winter shelters, I decided to join EHOC's eviction defense program last spring because I came to the realization that it required less effort, less money, and causes less harm for someone to maintain housing than to obtain housing. If our city is going to implement a housing-first solution to homelessness, then we should start by protecting the housing that individuals already have. Doing so will save government funds, increase public health, and decrease violent crime. EHOC operates an eviction defense hotline, and over the past year, we've seen a dramatic increase in calls from St. Louisans seeking legal assistance. But our small program, and you saw her, it's mainly Kennedy, our small program cannot handle all the cases coming in. As such, every single week, our staff members have to tell callers that we won't be able to take their eviction cases and that we can only provide self-advocacy materials and maybe referrals to one of the few other agencies doing this work. And yet, we get emails from those agencies saying, hey, we're on diversion, we can't take cases this week or next, so please stop referring. And then where do we tell people to go? What usually happens is they go into court unprepared, if they can find the court building at all, and our court becomes less efficient. Cases are not resolved because opposition attorneys, landlord attorneys, are less willing to negotiate with pro se defendants. And so we have an ineffective, protracted legal process. Right to counsel would fix that. Much like having a right to counsel in criminal cases, having a right to counsel in civil cases makes our courts more efficient and makes sure that people's rights are protected. Right now, the status quo we have is not sustainable. Tenants' needs are not being met, and St. Louis needs to adequately fund the right to counsel. It's really important to understand that we're not only talking about people who have been evicted because they haven't paid their rent, which I know is one of the opposition talking points that I've been hearing. What we see time and time again is illegal evictions are being filed based upon discrimination, but people who don't have representation cannot make affirmative defenses. And so people who are minorities, racial, ethnic, language, people who speak minority languages are not getting protections from the discrimination. People who are being put out because they got pregnant and their landlord says that now they're over occupancy. We need attorneys to help people defend their civil rights. And that's one of the important things that would come of right to counsel. The Fair Housing Act protects people based upon these classes, but if there's no attorney telling people that they have those rights, and if there's no one who's willing to actually look into the eviction case that's been filed and find out where the affirmative defenses are,
time.
thank you, then they are not going to actually be able to enforce those rights. So please adequately fund the right to counsel. Thank you.
Chiquita Hill.
Hi, you all. My name is Chiquita Hill, and I represent the First Ward. And I just wanted to do like an impact statement based on my personal experience on being homeless. I wrote it down, but I always just kind of speak from my chest. I have faced chronic homelessness all my life. Okay, and it was due to my mom's decisions, my mom's choices. And I get emotional when I hear everybody's stories. First off, I'm a foster kid. When my mom was 16 or so, probably a little younger, she was molested at home by her mother's husband. So my mom had to decide whether she would stay there and continue to be molested, or let her siblings stay there and her mom with the man who took care of them and made sure they were provided for as far as shelter, food, etc. Back in the day, people would sweep a lot of things under the rug. So that's what's going on still today. Nothing's really changed. So based on my experiences, after my adopted grandma passed, I was about 16 or 17 when she passed, but I had my first child. I'm not gonna say he was a mistake. I planned all 6 of my kids. It's just things happen during the course of me learning, life and stepping into life. And I just wanna say a lot of people that are out here unhoused or facing homelessness aren't all on drugs or addicts. I have a mental issue. I suffered trauma from a child. The same thing my mom went through. And I would tell her today I love her and I respect her so much because I get my strength from her at the end of the day. My mom and dad, they OD'd last year. If they had resources when they were younger, it starts at home. You know what I'm saying? How could she get it from home if she wasn't protected at home? My mom didn't have a support system, and I thank God that my foster mother, grandma stepped in. She adopted many kids. We all had different issues. But my grandma always said it takes a village. She was a social worker. She fought for everybody. It didn't matter your color. I know growing up, we had multiple races, all different type of people she looked out for. You know, it didn't matter. That's just how Miss Brown was, and I just thank God for her also. But getting back to the right to counsel, the right to counsel is important for kids who mothers, like me, was a single mother, who face eviction due to a mental issue and a disability that is unseen. You all cannot see my disability. I was hit by a senior citizen maybe 12 years ago. I cannot work like I would love to work. I have 3 in college, single parent. The income that I get with disability, I can't afford rent anywhere, and I thank God for housing. But housing needs to step up too, because like many have said, their landlords have tried to force them out just because you want to increase the rent. I'm a damn good tenant. I'm going to take care of your stuff like I want mine taken care of. So don't discredit tenants, because sometimes you got to weed out these bad landlords that's messing up our characters. Thank you all for listening. And those are just some of my stories, and I'm not the only one that's going through it, and I feel for these teenagers out here because I'm struggling with mine, but I'm going to fight for my kids and these kids that don't have a voice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Damon Starks.
Good afternoon, everyone. All right, my name is Damon Starks. I live in the 11th Ward, Midtown, per se. I am here supporting and asking that you pass board bill for tenants' right to counsel. We got to understand that a lot of these tenants out here, I have a speech prepared, but you hear the problems. This is an opportunity for you to change that. Here's an opportunity I'm finna bring in solutions. First off, we got to lower rent, get rent affordable, go after these landlords that is not taking care of their properties. It's not the tenant's fault. These properties are starting to fall apart and these landlords are not taking care of it. It is not their fault that they do not have representation when they go to court for eviction notice. Here's a bill that is proposed to change that. Let's change St. Louis. Over half of the housing units available in St. Louis are for renters, which make this a renter-friendly city. But this cannot be a renter-friendly city if the renters have no rights. Let's have rights for the renters. These landlords are increasing every day this rent. We have to get that under control. You cannot have where most people in a area code makes $30,000 on average, and your rent is $1,200 a month. Not gonna happen, especially with the wages that they paying us here in the city of St. Louis. Change what y'all doing. We have to make a change. This bill right here, Rights to Counsel, is the first step. Thank you.
Karen Yang.
Hello, my name is Karen Jalian Yang. I'm the Director of Storytelling and Communications at Ford through Ferguson. I live in the 7th Ward, hi Alisha, in 63118. Before I worked at Ford through Ferguson, I worked with artists, and one of those talented, amazing artists and creatives is Katara Parson. You might have heard her singing across the city, her beautiful hands on the piano. It's just magic. Well, she talked to me today. She lives in 63111 because her situation is dire. For the past several years, she's been a full-time musician, but she's experienced discrimination and mistreatment in the music industry, which has resulted in not very many gigs. She is struggling. And now she started her first day on the job here at City Hall in an office job, 9 to 5. And she wants protection. She wants right to counsel. She was on the verge of tears when I talked to her because she is working with a landlord who is not very helpful. He doesn't give her receipts when she pays her rent. There's no real paperwork, nothing official. And she really could use rental assistance. And she hopes that she, with all her talent and all her skills and all her amazingness, will not be on the streets. But it doesn't mean that anyone who, can't play piano or can't sing or whatever, everyone should be able to have a right to counsel and a right to housing. Since 2020, she mentioned that since COVID started, everything has gotten worse. Things have gotten much more expensive. So, whether people are dealing with pests, dealing with housing that is falling apart, people who are senior citizens, people who are dealing with all sorts of issues, no matter what's happening, we need to live in a world where we have stable, affordable housing that is accessible to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Wilcox. I live in the downtown West neighborhood in the 14th Ward, speaking in support of Board Bill 59 to establish a tenant right to counsel. We often fail to acknowledge the degree to which people are continuing to struggle to meet their basic needs. We also don't fully appreciate the imbalance in power between landlords and tenants. Landlords are becoming increasingly aggressive in their efforts to evict a record number of tenants. Sometimes these tactics are illegal, as in cases I've seen with landlords refusing to accept payment or posting illegal notices. Evictions in St. Louis are averaging at least 40% above pre-COVID levels every month. Around 80% of 211 calls are for housing, shelter, or utilities. Now that the federal rental assistance is exhausted, this last resort is virtually non-existent. The minute the emergency rental assistance expired, the tenants at my building immediately received notices that the landlord is adding new late fees and speeding up eviction filings. They are doing this because they know that people are desperate for any housing they can afford. They know they can be instantly replaced and they can rotate human beings in and out like cogs in the machine, including buildings specifically subsidized by the government. I've been connecting people to rental assistance programs for several years now, often through rental assistance clinics, where even with nearly a dozen volunteers, we go well into the night, much further than we expected, because the need is so great. We have an incredible amount of people on the edge of homelessness in a city and country where we are escalating the cruelty with which we treat our unhoused neighbors. I was at the riverfront when the city lined up at least half a dozen trucks all day to throw away and destroy the belongings of people who had survived there for years, when there is no emergency shelter, let alone permanent housing available. Right to counsel would give tenants a chance to defend what few rights they have against landlords who are held effectively to no standard, as they are aggressively raising rents and displacing people at a rate I don't think we've seen in my lifetime. The market is so hostile, I've encountered many instances where landlords are more interested in evicting their tenants than accepting assistance for back rent from government programs. It's worth keeping in mind that eviction is a violent practice that removes families from their homes for the sole purpose of returning an asset to the market for profit. We have more homes than unhoused people, and people in the city die of exposure every winter. Right to counsel is the first measure we can take to limit the practice while we do what we must to guarantee a home for all. I ask that you pass Board Bill 59. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Eddie Gamble. I'm a resident of the city. I live on Folsom near Tiffany Heights, and I'm also with Action St. Louis. I would like to speak to the emotional and mental impact of keeping your neighbors, which Right to Counsel will do down the line. Me and my wife, we got married right out of the end of the pandemic. And due to some issues, we were going to live with family. That fell through. She suffered depression and had to leave work. And as of May, I was laid off from my job. The only reason that we were able to survive those trials was because we have our neighbors who live in the building under us and her 3 friends who live across the street. So it was very frightening for me to receive a text from my neighbor about his rent being raised, usually because he actually calls on our landlord to do things, but when mine wasn't. And he asked me for resources, and because I was connected to Action St. Louis, I was able to point him in a direction, and that was resolved, and they're still there. And so for me, Right to Counsel, for me, what it means personally is that Right to Counsel is a protection of my support network. It keeps people in their homes, and it keeps many of us mentally and emotionally well. for those with the number of evictions in the city, there are a lot of people who just don't have that, whose support networks have fallen through. So I just ask for I'm speaking in support of Board Bill 59 to keep people mentally and emotionally well so that they can still keep their support networks. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Like I used to testify in this room all the time. Yeah, so my name is Kayla Reed. I'm the Executive Director of Action St. Louis. And I'm a renter. I live in the 7th Ward and have for the last 5 years. But before I moved to the city of St. Louis, I was evicted twice when I was 23 and 24 years old. The first time I was evicted, it was because I was working as a pharmacy technician full-time, and I had to get a car repair that cost about $800. And my check was only $800. And so I didn't pay my rent. And they had a policy where by the 20th of the month, if your rent wasn't below $200, they filed an eviction. My rent balance on the 20th was $205. So they filed an eviction. I went to court in St. Louis County, and when I walked in, I saw a sea of Black women with their children dealing with the realities of facing evictions. None of us went before the judge. We all went into a side room with a lawyer who represented our apartment complex and signed some paperwork that said we owed $205, but when we walked out those rooms, we'd owed thousands in legal fees, late fees, and fines. And when you don't pay those late fees and fines, they garnish your check. And if they can't garnish your check, they put a lien on your bank account. And I experienced all of that. And if it wasn't for friends who advised me on how to navigate that process, I wouldn't be able to have found a second apartment. And the second apartment I found while I was going through that process was an apartment complex that targeted folks who had evictions on their records. So it was substandard living. That apartment complex has been since condemned multiple times. And what happened there, substandard conditions mean roaches and rats and all types of mold and leaking roofs. And so once again, I found myself trying to figure out how to pay what I owed and how to pay to live. And I got evicted again. And I'm telling this personal story because I can tell you all the research and all the statistics, but the reality that I faced when I was 23 and 24 years old is the reality that thousands of renters in this city face every single day, where they are not able to pay what they owe and to pay to live, feed their families, get their car fixed, travel to and from work. And Right to Counsel stops them from going in that side room and talking to someone and walking out owing thousands of dollars and being able to actually advocate for their realities and advocate for long-term housing. So this bill is a step in the right direction. And those lawyers, if I'm just telling you the truth, chased me for years. I just finally paid off the $5,000 I owed that first apartment complex when I got evicted because they continue to charge interest on the balance that I owed from when I was 24 years old. I am 33. And so I just want to say that this reality, everyone doesn't make the income that I make. Everyone doesn't have the lawyers and the organizations like Action and Arch City. And so this bill creates standardization for folks to be able to find stable housing and actually have protections that they need. So I ask that you pass this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ainsley Harkins. I live in the 5th Ward, and I am coming out here to support Bill 59. I think just as everyone has said, this is something that we need. I think that it's also important to acknowledge that the way the city has been going about dealing with renters and tenants, and especially the homelessness issue in our city. I know just driving down Washington Avenue, there are signs that are ordinances against homeless people telling them not to have aggressive begging. And anytime you walk into this building, I know that there's a park right across the street where there are gonna be plenty of unhoused folks. And that is the reality, but instead we see the city who's not doing anything to help renters or help support tenants. Instead, they have to go get fees, do all this extra work, when if you can't even pay your rent, how are you gonna buy a lawyer? It doesn't make sense. And I think especially, like as many people have said, so much is out-of-state property management companies buying out and just tossing around units, so people don't even know who they're supposed to pay their rent to, much less the rules they're supposed to work with. That just happened in my unit, where Poplar Homes, and they have a call center that's not even in our country. So whenever we try to call them and talk to things, they just tried to pull something over all of our tenants' heads. When it was June last month, we came around and they didn't have our payment portal up, and we didn't even find out because they didn't tell us we had to call our old property management company. And they didn't even have it open until 6 hours before rent was due. And this is only because I was emailing them that I knew. They didn't even have a big announcement that went out to people that it was open to pay until I emailed back and said, why don't you tell the rest of the tenants? 10 minutes later, we get an email that says, the portal is open. Tenants are tossed around by landlords, and this bill is just a step, but I think it's also important that it's holding landlords accountable, because at the end of the day, tenants are getting trashed by landlords, and the city is doing nothing to stop it as now. We need to fund this bill, and in further steps after this bill, we need to also go after the landlords who are hurting these people, these property management companies who aren't even from Missouri, who are harassing and evicting tenants. That's all I have to say, but thank you for your time.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Daisy Jones. I'm a tenant of the Fifth Ward. I'm here to speak today on the Bill 59. Unlike a lot of my peers, I'm not that well educated on a lot of the topics. I do have a lot of personal stories involving this particular topic. I, unlike a lot of my peers as well, have faced multiple evictions. 3 of those specific incidents led to homelessness. A few things I gathered from those experiences. One, not being able to eat or not having an understanding of where you are living or where you physically take space kind of forces you to assume things about yourself. It forces you to do things that you never would consider with a full stomach or a bed to go to. Secondly, when I was offered help, it was hard to escape this embittered feeling after a few cars pass you and after a few people treat you with very little value. You grow embittered and personalize your pain. The third thing I realized when I finally accepted help and entered a Salvation Army for the first time was I was the only, at the time, young white male. I was stood out in that environment. Everyone else was a person of color. Everyone else was a child without shoes. Everyone else was a single mother who hadn't eaten. Everyone else was a trans person who couldn't get their medical attention. And so I've been struggling with what kind of statistics I could look up to or check up to try to come to you guys to ask you to consider this. I think at the end of the day, the thing that's very starkly obvious to me is that none of this will change, none of the attitude around this conversation will change until the landlords, the city council, the government of St. Louis itself starts to prioritize the people over the payment. The people living in the building over how much money they can make off of them. I will speak for myself, and I'm sure many people here do not appreciate being seen as a statistic or a dollar amount. So that's my speech.
Thank you for your testimony, and I want to really just emphasize that you speaking to your experience here today is all the expertise you need to bring. That is what you are experts in, is your own experience, and that is why we ask you to come and speak to us. Let us worry about the statistics. Let us worry about all the complicated legal language. That's not your job. Your job is to tell us what you're experiencing so that we can respond to that and try to fix that. I really appreciate hearing from everybody today. These stories are incredible to hear. So with that, let's hear some more. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Maggie Olivia. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a renting resident of the 7th Ward, but I'm here today on behalf of Pro-Choice Missouri. To keep it short, we advocate to protect and expand all Missourians' bodily autonomy. Like you've heard from the many people before me, we know that about half of our residents are long-term renters like myself. That means about half of our city's population does not have that protection against frivolous eviction and other forms of financial abuse, because that really is what this comes down to. Controlling other people's resources is a form of financial abuse. The people and families of our city deserve this guaranteed right to counsel that will increase their stability and security, and in turn, their bodily autonomy and ability to make their own decisions about their bodies, families, and futures. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, HUD's committee.
Good afternoon.
My name is Kennard Williams. I'm the organizing manager with Action St. Louis. As many of you know, since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, Action St. Louis has been responding to the looming eviction crisis and its impact on renters across the city, and particularly North St. Louis. From outreaching tenants who needed to certify their eligibility for the federal eviction moratorium in 2020, to directly working with the city to notify renters about the rental assistance program in 2021, contacting over 800 people facing eviction, to building out our We the Tenants campaign that you see plenty of members in this room packing it from. Our organization has remained steadfast in our commitment to working to keep the people in our communities safe and housed. This year, the We the Tenants campaign has released the Right to Counsel Toolkit with information about evictions in St. Louis. We'll make those available to the committee members. But it contains data around statistics of the eviction trends in the city of St. Louis that has really brought this issue to a head. It's always been an issue, and it's intensified since 2020 with the pandemic. An estimated 55% of St. Louis's units are renter occupied. Of that, 40% of renters reported that their rent is 35% or more of their household income. The average rent price for a 2-bedroom apartment in the city of St. Louis in 2014 was $1,000 a month. And in 2022, the same apartment would be listed at $1,425 a month. Looking at rent prices and median income in 2014, Black residents spent 57% of their income on rent, while white residents spent 24% of their income on rent. More than 7 years later, and those numbers are still very similar. In 2022, Black residents spent 50% of their income on housing, while white residents spent 23%. The impact of evictions is felt for years to come. Evictions have the power to completely upend and stop a family's upward economic mobility and has a direct impact on the educational outcomes of children. After being evicted, an eviction judgment stays on people's records for years and limits access to housing and begins to dictate where people can live and who will rent to them. School-age children are impacted by eviction by no longer being able to access educational opportunities in the same district and potentially disrupting needed student services such as counseling, meals, special education support. In 2020, when the pandemic started, I worked at a school. And when school shut down, we started to look towards the summer, and we saw that we needed to follow up with families to get them supplies, let them know about meals and things like that. And thank you. And one thing that stuck out to me was how many empty seats were at that school at the beginning of the year. How many people we tried to reach out to about meals and supplies that they needed for school that we couldn't find because they'd been evicted over the summer. We urge you to pass this bill because renters need it. Renters need protections in this city. The amount of things that we've seen, very well. I urge y'all to pass Board Bill 59, Tenants' Right to Counsel, for the sake of renters in St. Louis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Check one, check two, okay, sorry. Good afternoon, HUD's committee. Good afternoon, everyone who's here. Thank you for allowing us to speak. My name is Sharon Jones. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with Homes for All St. Louis. I am an organizer with Homes for All St. Louis, but I'm coming to you with the organization and personally. So we at Homes for All St. Louis are ecstatic that this bill has been introduced again and that it's being funded. So we want Board Bill 59 passed through HUD's committee today, since it will greatly impact renters and renter workers in St. Louis for the better. And I can give you many reasons why right to counsel is important. First of all, eviction numbers are disturbingly and unnecessarily high, are race-based, and lead to awful outcomes for renters and renter workers. Now, to be sure, every eviction, each and every eviction is violent, and especially so when wages are stagnant and rents keep increasing. In St. Louis City, there are 18,000 evictions in St. Louis City and the county in 2019 and 20. And expiring pandemic eviction protections have put increasing numbers of low-income rent tenants at risk, widening racial disparities. They're costly, but importantly, right to counsel would empower renters by creating a more equitable relationship between landlords and renters, and it importantly is a mandate, a government-supported mandate to protect renters, especially those most marginalized by inequities in the housing system. And right to counsel just plain works if you want to keep people in their homes and keep communities intact. But for personal reasons, I support right to counsel. When I was 18, first year of college, my family was evicted from, ironically, Oakmont Townhomes, if you know where that is, but we were evicted from that complex, and as a result, my sister and I experienced acute depression, and my mom and our family had to move in with family members, to be frank, we really didn't even like. And so, not only did it take a physical and emotional toll, but it took a toll on already a strained family dynamic. The second time I was evicted was because I was living under a slumlord, and here on the south side, this landlord decided not to fix any of the issues in the apartment, including mold, including pests, including leaks. And I didn't know what any tenant rights, but I knew what a strike was. So I said, fix it or I'm not paying rent. And of course, they evicted me. Now, one of the things we don't talk about is this it's almost like a club that lawyers and judges belong to that we don't get to be a part of because we don't know legalese, and we haven't been to law school for 2 years, and because we haven't interned with some clerk somewhere. But thank you. But to end it, let's pass right to counsel because it'll benefit renters and it will even the playing field between renters and landlords. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Sarah Watkins. I live in the 7th Ward. I'm a housing advocate and a tenant organizer with Homes for All St. Louis. We believe that housing is a human right, and we fight for safe, clean, dignified housing. And I'm here to testify in support of Board Bill 59 to bring right to counsel to tenants in St. Louis and to protect Black women and children who are most likely to face eviction and who suffer the most from housing insecurities. Sorry. In 2018, I was forced to move from my home in Dutchtown when it was condemned due to dangerous conditions that my landlord neglected for years. Soon after, in 2019, I became one of 5,000 households facing eviction in St. Louis when my new landlord filed an eviction in retaliation against me after fighting against the living conditions of myself and my son and my neighbors. Things like no hot water, suffocating heat, freezing temps, and even exposure to raw sewage. After connecting with housing advocates and impacted tenants in my neighborhood, I was lucky enough to receive legal assistance from Arch City Defenders. They assisted me with a lawyer to represent me in court. What happened was the lawyer discovered that my case was filed illegally and the case was settled in my favor. However, I am still stuck with that case on my record, and that has affected how I search for housing. As we've heard, the eviction process is intimidating and confusing. Eviction attorneys take advantage of this. Tenants feel powerless and unheard of because for many of us, justice is out of reach. While landlords are allowed to illegally evict tenants and exploit low and income poor tenants for profit, tenants struggle to pay rent amid inflation and rising rent. Right to counsel protects tenants and begins to reduce the harm of the city's complacency of the crooked and negligent landlord-tenant culture that thrives at the cost of the mental and physical health of residents in the city. So to the committee and to everyone listening, I ask, what role do you play in this current housing role crisis? How can you use your power and your advocacy to advance more renter protections? And how can you increase funding of housing programs and policy? And lastly, I just want to say that the education and engagement piece is very important. Through this increased tenant awareness, we can further expose practices of landlords and the struggles of tenants, and that's what we need to determine what we need to do to move forward. So please pass this bill. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you all for your testimony. Was this anybody's first time testifying? Yes, thank you. Absolutely, thank you. Some of the things that all of the testimonies absolutely resonated. Some of the things I wanted to make sure that we all paid attention to was, thank you, Ms. Jones and the brother who made the connection between the impact on mental health that evictions cause, and for the sister that told her story that absolutely spoke to the generational impact of eviction in our communities. I know that this legislation is to the role that we can play if we pass this definitely includes education and engagement, which is big when you talk about access and take away the vulnerable part, because when you know better, you do better, and when you have the tools to fight, you fight harder and stronger. So again, this is a good piece, and I want to also say that to the people that said that the priorities here, this is actually one of the priorities in the resolution that we'll be passing out later on today. And I just want to make sure you know that you pay attention to people that are in place, because not just us playing this role, because we all play an important role today, but the new director, Dr. Pearson of Department of Human Services, which is who will administer this fund and administer this program, is an amazing person who has a heart for the unhoused and the tenant and the rights and the human services in the city of St. Louis, which is good because that means that he knows how they all impact each other and how they can move. And so he'll be able to pay attention and make sure that this program is done and done right. So I just want to make sure you all, again, know that it's different when you have different people in places, and you all have a leader here that it speaks to always the power of numbers, and the power of numbers here is voting and getting the right people in place to put the right people in place to fight, right? And so with that, she might not want to, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring up former Alderwoman Christine, see if she had anything to say, because I know when you have a passion and a heart and you fought this hard, and this is, you can kind of see the light coming. If you want some, I would want you to say anything, just hi. You don't want to say anything? Oh, she's so sweet. All right, let's go. Okay, well, she also offered to answer any questions from the committee, so if you have any questions, please, we can go forward with that part. Okay. And when you all submit the written testimony, it's just as important and as powerful as when you come and speak, because it's put in our drives and we can reference it and have it and share it, not just with the committee, but with our colleagues as well.
Yes. So now I'll allow for some comment or responses. I know we didn't say much during testimony, but we can go in order of seniority if you all want to just kind of respond. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Sonnier. Thank you all for coming. I know a lot of you through community activism and work that you've all done for years and years. So first of all, it means a lot to have everyone here speaking for people who aren't here now, have had issues with housing in the past, or are currently going through issues now. I actually spent part of my morning in the Carnahan Courthouse with Arch City Defenders, who I couldn't be more grateful for, who have filed a class action lawsuit against a slumlord in my ward, who I have been, I've represented this part of the ward for just a few months, but in that short time, I had multiple tenants reaching out to me about issues that they were experiencing, and I was in a similar boat to so many of you, referring to you all and to Arch City and to Legal Services of Eastern Missouri, and trying to find services for these folks and not really able to do too much for them in the city. So I appreciate the city taking this, hopefully the Board of Aldermen moving forward and making this something that is possible. I think there's a lot more to do here. You know, eviction is just one piece of the puzzle, dealing with the housing while people are in it, and being able to help folks to communicate with landlords and to make sure landlords know that tenants have people looking out for them, I think is really crucial. My first job, I was as a community organizer at an affordable housing nonprofit and helped to run a tenant clinic in Massachusetts. And the number of folks who would come in with the same landlords and the same folks causing these issues. So, you know, I know there's a lot of people that need to be held accountable, and I appreciate you all being here to do that, and you have my commitment to do whatever I can to hold folks accountable as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Browning.
I have no questions. I just want to start off by saying thank you to Alderwoman Clark Hubbard for bringing this forward. Thank you to all the co-sponsors who signed on, and to former Alderwoman Christine Ingracia for heading this up last session. Quite a few of you spoke to mental health, and I thought that was especially important to live your life and go through the day-to-day trials that we all go through, and then to have housing insecurity added on top of that. I don't think people realize the ripple effect that has on your life and the rest of our city. So when we talk about the right to counsel, we actually are talking about something that will improve not just the lives of tenants, not just the lives of people who are in danger of being evicted, but actually every single person's life in this city. And we are talking about raising that standard. And I think we will see a higher quality of housing just by guaranteeing that people are represented when they go to court, because the shenanigans that slumlords try, they'll stop trying those when they know that you have that even playing field, when you have that representation in court. And I also want to note that we're not done here. We're going to pass this out of committee today. I know we are. And we're going to do it unanimously. I know we are. But we're not done today. We're going to add on top of this rights for tenants. We're going to make sure that we are raising the standard of quality housing in the city. We're going to track rental properties in this city so that we know not just what's available, but also the quality of what's available, so that we can hold slumlords accountable, so that we can really make sure that everyone's got a safe place to lay their head at night. And when we do this, we know that we will improve kids' lives. We know that their education will improve. We know that, again, it's going to have that effect that just ripples throughout the city. So, again, thank you so much to everybody who came and shared their stories with us today. It meant so much to hear from you all. I wish we had, the ability to hear stories of people who couldn't make it here today, too. And thank you to those who submitted written testimony. We're going to read it all. It's so important that you're here. I see a lot of familiar faces. Those of you who fight for this every day, who work in this field, a big thank you to you as well. With that, I'm going to shut up now. It meant a whole lot to me, and I really appreciate you all being here.
I echo the sentiments of a lot of what my colleagues said before me. I really I think everyone has kind of, the Honorable Ingracia and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, and all of the organizers in the room. So for me, I really want to thank all of the organizers. And if you're here today and you're taking a seat, then you've done some organizing to be here. I've so often seen these conversations happening, and it's only the property owners and the landowners and the lawyers in the room. So I'm super excited that, tenants and people who are being directly impacted by the issue are here. I think as far as I'm concerned, housing is a human right, and rights don't exist without protection. And under capitalism, they don't exist without funding. So I'm very excited. So I'm very excited that we are passing this through. And also, I know this room is full of adults, and in our city, we talk about young people in all types of ways, but we don't talk about these type of inequities. How can a young person have a certain access to a quality of life when they're constantly displaced, when they don't have rights, when their families are being disrooted?
Yeah.
We talk about the stabilization of neighborhoods, but we don't talk about how tenants have a key role. The longer that you can stay in that housing and sustain your family and have your rights, the better for all of our communities, whether you're a homeowner or a tenant or not. So this type of policy is holistic policy that will benefit folks from all generations, from all backgrounds, from all races, and whether you're a homeowner or not, you want to have a city where everybody has rights and have protections, and we're actually a city that is equitable for all of us. So those are the ends of my remarks, and I'm happy now to call for a vote, and maybe we can even just pass this in bank.
I move to make Board Bill number 59 in bank.
Second.
Previous roll. Hearing no objection to previous roll.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Madam.
Make the motion.
So I will make the motion that we pass Board Bill 59 in bank. With a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Previous roll.
Madam Clerk, you need to call it?
We did previous roll?
Yes. All right, excellent. Thank you.
All right. I promise y'all, I don't think I'm speaking for myself. I'm probably speaking for my colleagues, all my colleagues in the room and listening colleagues, that these type of days at work balance out those other type of days at work, right? So thank you all. Thank you all. So with that, we'll move to resolution number 35. Madam Clerk, if you could read resolution number 35.
Resolution number 35, priorities for the Housing, Urban Development, and Zoning Committee. Whereas every person has the right to safe, accessible, and affordable housing, the St. Louis region lacks sufficient affordable housing for all, particularly for households making below 60% of area median income. And whereas 35% of St. Louis City residents are cost burdened, defined as households who pay 30% or more of their household income on housing such as rent or mortgage expenses. And whereas existing affordable housing units have been decreasing due to vacancy, insufficient maintenance, and the conversion of multifamily units into single-family units. And whereas a diversity of housing types is called for in order to meet the needs of residents, including permanent supportive housing, which provides services that help people lead more stable and productive lives. And whereas landlords who do not maintain their units by making repairs or unresponsive to complaints and intimidate vulnerable tenants into accepting living conditions that do not meet housing codes or detrimental to a functional and safe housing market. And whereas residents of low-wealth neighborhoods and communities of color are often subject to the negative impacts of large urban development projects, including gentrification and displacement, but have only limited access to the new economic opportunities that such projects provide. And whereas it is the responsibility of this committee to consider a committee to address the shortage of quality affordable housing and to promote equitable and accountable urban development. And whereas the HUD's committee serves as an important role in the process for the City of St. Louis to ensure the public voice, as well as those of SLDC and private and institutional partners, are heard in the direction towards fair-minded, equitable development across our entire city. Now therefore be it resolved that 2023-2024 Housing, Urban Development, and Zoning Committee will prioritize policy that supports the creation and preservation of affordable housing, improves community engagement processes for development, and creates protections for tenants and those that are housing insecure. Introduced this second day of June 2023 by the Honorable Shameem Clark Hubbard and President Megan Green.
Can I be? Oh, I'm sorry. I would just like to be added as co-sponsor.
So noted.
All right, so this resolution number 35, is something new that we haven't done down here at the Board of Aldermen, to the credit of our president, President Green, and making sure that we are all working towards the same goals and efforts and collective efforts towards, as we said, fair-minded, equitable development across our entire city and rights. Making sure that every person has a right to safe, accessible, and affordable housing rather in our city, as well as the other things that we noted in here. So with that, I'll open up, see if my colleagues have any questions. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you. No questions, but I do feel like this signifies a very different path for this committee. When this is my third year now, going into my third year being an alderperson, and I wasn't on this committee for the first 2 years, but I knew this committee as sort of the when big developers go to get tax incentives kind of committee. That was really how I thought of it. And so to read this resolution and to be part of this committee now where we're talking about a completely different point of view, I think is a lot more representative of the realities of the city that we live in, and more representative of, I think, a city that is more just, more equitable, and better for the people who live here. So with that, I'd also like to be added as a co-sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you.
So noted.
Alderman Browning.
Yes, I echo Alderwoman Schweitzer's comments. This is incredible to see. As somebody who watched board meetings from the past several years, they were often dispiriting things to watch. And now we have what only looks like hope. Hope for a better city, hope for a higher standard of living in this city. And we're going to work our hardest to deliver. And that's what this resolution is about, is promising you that these are our priorities that we are going to work on every day on this committee. So with that, I would also like to be added as a co-sponsor. Let's just make this unanimous. Thanks.
Vice Chair Sonnier.
I echo everything that's been said. I think this is a great path moving forward, and I'm glad that we are taking the people's interests into account.
Great. All right. So that's good. Our resolutions, the one thing they do is offer consensus. And it's always better when we're working together. So with that, I'll accept the motion to pass Resolution 35 in bank.
Motion to pass Resolution 35 in bank.
Second.
Previous roll.
All right. Hearing no objections, we have passed Resolution number 35 in bank. I've acknowledged our written testimonies, so does anyone have any other announcements?
Are you passing that with the do pass recommendation?
Yes, yes, I'm sorry.
For anyone watching, if you live at the fountains at Carondelet, please do not hesitate to reach out to me or our city defenders about the housing conditions there and the ongoing class action lawsuit. So please, tenants, if you know anyone who lives in that area, please reach out to them and let them know that there are people trying to help with their situation. Thank you.
Good, that's good information to take back. Okay, I would like to excuse Alderman Cone for a necessary absence.
Motion to excuse Alderman Cone for necessary.
All right, and with that, I will accept the motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Previous roll, so moved. Have a great day.